Now, of course, you have to ask the opposite. What would you say are some of the?
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Give it to me.
Oh my gosh, I have never
Do
done this
it.
before.
I'm not
Um,
guaranteeing an
I was
answer,
gonna say,
but
what are some of the?
Welcome back to another episode of the What's the Big Idea podcast, the podcast that interviews former associates of Big Idea Productions to talk about life before, during, and after VeggieTales. It's back to Bryan time, so hear more about Big Idea, becoming a teacher, and even more right now.
Going back to the episodes you had a hand in, Lyle the Kindly Viking, similar to King George, Bubbles, and now you deal with the Beast of Water. What was that?
they really pushed the limit on that. But it was trying to remember with that one how we did the water for the print stuff because I seem to remember we had to like digitally paint it instead of simulating it because it was so complicated. Although it was a good thing for them to do because it paved the way for doing stuff for Jonah. My recollection of it, it looked really good and it was really pushing the technical limits of what they could do. But I also remember it being a little difficult to work with, especially when we're trying to render stuff super high resolution. That's my memory of the water stuff. I did like though. It was fun working with the technical guys that were on the floor above me because they were so smart and so good at what they were doing and they were excited to show people like how they did this and how they made all this stuff work. Same with like when they get new character rigs and they kind of show us how they were working and stuff. I like having a foot in the technical and the artistic side. So that was another thing that was really fun to work with there.
Now, I must wonder how crazy must have been for you to work on the Ultimate Silly Song Countdown because that episode had a very short turnaround. I guess also similar to End of Silliness, that also had a very brief development cycle from concept to being released out the door. What was that like? And then also, if you can go back on End of Silliness, what was the deadline for that one as well? Sort of a two for one.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm trying to remember. I do remember it being fast. I remember the cover for the Ultimate Silly Song was that one was super fun. If I remember making like a sombrero. The thing is that the turnaround on that, like with the department that I was in the design department, was on a different kind of calendar schedule than the actual animation studio where they were cranking that stuff out for those ones. I just remember that one being fun just because of the silliness of it and the cover for that having a lot of fun stuff in it.
I remember that cover because it had, I believe, the only instance of silver, some sort of
Oh
translucent
yeah.
thing on the font of the episode itself. And also, as you mentioned, the render of Larry with all of the references to the
That
silly
yep,
songs.
that was yep. I remember using like a procedural texture for the sombrero on that. Strange things are popping into my head as I'm remembering all this stuff from so long ago.
From one silly song compilation to the next one, you worked on my favorite one of the bunch, which was Jonah sing along songs and more. What is the more part to your contribution for that?
Sing along songs and more. What did I do on that? You better tell me. I don't even remember.
Let me see. So it was a very bright orange cover. On the front, it had Larry, Archibald Asparagus, Bob the Tomato,
Oh,
Mr. Lunt, and then on
that
top had Khalil.
Khalil was on that. Yeah, that's right. I want to say that one. I rendered out all the characters on that, and I think one of the designers then put that cover all together. I don't remember what if I did anything for the actual episode on that. I feel like I did something on it though.
Let me see if I could help
Yeah.
further jog your memory. That one had a bunch of skits with Bob and Larry in them. One of the more unique ones I remember was when Larry was having this auction and was trying to auction off a bunch of quote unquote memorabilia from past episodes and whatnot. And there was this other one where he was playing Indiana Larry, and then he tried to do a parody of James Bond, and then he went on the Larry Boy costume as well. It was all about Archibald being afraid to get out of his dressing room
Yeah.
because he gets swallowed by
Yeah.
a whale,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they were trying to convince him to
Yeah.
get out.
I may have done some prop modeling for that. Yeah, it's hard to remember anymore.
It's all right if
Yeah,
not
that's
they's coming
fine.
to you at first. All right. This almost slipped out my mind, but also you did some stuff for 321
Yeah.
Penguins, and I would imagine that's pretty That's pretty different considering, they're all limbed and everything.
Yep. I modeled grandma's house, the exterior of it. I remember building all those rocks and stones and building the thatch roof and all of that. Yeah, working with the limbed characters was fun, and they were rigged really well. That was a really fun show. Keith did a lot of work on that one. That team was structured completely differently than the rest of the VeggieTales studio. I don't know if you've talked to anybody about that, but that was really interesting.
I remember Keith and somebody else that I can't remember, but yeah, I mean, if you have any more insight about that, then feel free.
There's kind of several ways to kind of organize a pipeline and organize production. And instead of having like a modeling department and a layout department and a lighting department, everybody on that team kind of did multiple jobs. So they might be animating one day, and then they might also be doing lighting another day, or they might be doing rigging, or so they were all kind of really good at everything, as opposed to being more specific, just one task or one discipline, which was a cool way to do it. They were a little more scrappy too, I think.
The other guy that I remember was Tim Hodge. I actually got an interview with him
great.
last week. Yeah, it was basically Termite Ward of Warner Brothers. Sorry for some of the reverb in this room. But yeah, that's how I remember Keith Lango describing it, because it was like it was a smaller team than the main team doing VeggieTales, and they were the ones who were trying to get these episodes out on time. And I remember Tim and Keith talking about how stressful it was trying to do that very first episode, because the pipeline kind of got a little screwy Louie because of how loose it originally was.
Yeah, and they were trying to do it completely a different way. So
yeah, and then eventually they brought in somebody to string things out and whatnot. From that point on, you also, of course, like everyone else in the studio, was hands-on deck with Jonah. What can you tell us about your experience with Jonah?
Doing stuff for Jonah was fun. Again, I was down in the design department, but then they needed some modeling, so they had the 3D design department do modeling for it. And so they would, just give us the assignments of the things they needed modeled, and we would build them. So for us, it was pretty fun getting to work on the movie. And then we were also sort of separated out. So I think there were stresses and things going on in the main studio that we separated from, which may have made it a more enjoyable experience at times for us. I had a lot of fun modeling stuff for the ship and things, and then doing all the posters and other stuff too. So I enjoyed it, but that was a time when the studio was starting to get stressed. You could feel it kind of in the air that it was getting stressful. I don't know. What did other people tell you about working on that?
I remember that Phil Vischer spoke about this very stressful period where it seemed that all of the rendered frames were getting sucked into the render void from the render farm. Do you recall hearing something about that? And if you did, what was your perspective?
I just remember the stress level going up when they were rendering stuff out, and it filtered down to us, the stress levels. But yeah, I think they may not have built in anything into the schedule for if things started going wrong or weren't rendering properly or whatever, which of course made everything super stressful. I mean, it was a big step up in complexity and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, kind of not surprising in hindsight that it may have not gone exactly to plan rendering wise.
Now, I believe your next credit was Star of Christmas, and if research proves me correct, you actually did some animation on the DVD menus for that episode?
No, I don't think it was that one. I think it was The World of Autotainment. I did yeah, it's hard for me to remember all of this. Yeah, the one with the robots. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I did the menu animations for The World of Autotainment. I don't remember doing stuff for maybe I did. I don't know. I'm old and I don't remember everything. I remember having a lot of fun doing this stuff with the Autotainment one, though, with, I got to do these fun little characters hop across and the floor opening up and then falling through and a bunch of stuff like that, and animating those robots. That was fun.
That was another episode that was made on a very tight schedule. I think, if I remember, it was about 12 to 15 weeks of actual production time. So that was the record for like the fastest produced episode, which is crazy to think about. I hope that they didn't try to rush you.
I think that was partly why I probably was doing the animations for that, is because it was going so fast and they were running out of time and everything. Yeah, I just remember having a lot of fun. I got to come up with what actually the animations were for that too, which was part of the fun.
Oh yeah, I remember that having a lot of creative flair on the DVD menu. Yep. So Great job for your great work, your contributions. What I was about to ask you was that in the Cartoon Adventures of Larry Boy, you got a special thanks. I believe it was for Lego My Ego. Would you happen to remember what was the special thanks for that for?
I don't remember. I have no idea. I remember the special thanks, but I don't remember what in the world that was for. Yeah, I can't remember.
Perhaps your prog rock came in to save the day.
That's quite possible.
I guess we'll go with that. He also did some work on the video game Minnesota Cuke and the Coconut Apes.
Oh yeah. Yep. There was another department. They did the website stuff and then some of the gaming stuff. And so we got to do some work with them too. And that was Tim Johnson was the head of that team. That's another person. Loved working with Tim Johnson. That was another phenomenal person to work with. Super bright, super creative, another good sense of fun.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Autotainment was your last credited work for Big Idea before all of the firings and the bankruptcy happened. Would I be correct in that assumption?
That sounds right. Yeah, sort of. I did work after I left. I did work as a freelancer. So are you familiar with Lessons from the Sock Drawer?
I bet like in the original iteration of the company. I was going to ask you about some of the later stuff afterward.
Yep.
But yeah, the original incarnation, Autotainment was the last one,
Yep.
right?
That would be true.
What was your whole thought process about getting laid off? What would you say was the biggest factor that led to the death of Big Idea?
It was sad getting laid off, but it was also, you could see it coming. So, I mean, there were a lot of other people that got laid off before I did. You could see it coming. So I guess it wasn't that big a surprise. It was just kind of sad to see how it kind of fell apart. Other people know a lot more behind the scenes stuff about why it fell apart than I do. My sense was that there was miscalculation on the trajectory of sales of things. So they put a lot of money into the movie. I think it did okay, but it needed to do a lot more because they had spent based on projections of the video sales continuing to rise at the same curve. And I think that the curve slowed down, but they'd already been spending a lot of money for the movie and things. And so that's my sense, is that that was a part of it. Yeah, it was sad. It was sad to see it because I think it was a very unique animation studio and place to work. On the other hand, I'm super glad I did it. I made so many good friends. I had a great experience, worked on really fun projects, made lifelong friends. So yeah, I had no regrets at all.
Yeah, my next question was that Big Idea Productions was like the only real studio that you attached yourself with. Ever since then, you've been pretty much freelancing it. So would you say that you getting laid off has something to do with not really working specifically for a studio, or maybe something else?
I think part of it is that I would probably, if there were other studios that were like Big Idea, I would have been interested in that. But the standard studio model is not something that, at least that point in my life and since, is not something that I'm as interested in. And I have a lot of other, I like doing a lot of other stuff besides just what you would do in an animation studio. So I like publishing and children's books, and I really enjoyed teaching. And so that's just, that's the way it ended up.
And speaking of teaching, how was it that you served 16 years teaching under Huntington University? 16 years at Huntington.
That's crazy, huh? Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. That was the way that ended up happening was really fun. Lance Clark at Huntington University was starting a digital media arts department, and he heard what was going on at Big Idea. And so he's a bold guy, and he got in touch with Phil Vischer and said, hey, are any of the people there that are leaving, would they make good professors? And Phil recommended me and Steve Leeper. And so university ended up hiring both of us to start the animation department there. And yeah, I loved teaching. I loved working with students. And yeah, that worked out.
As of course you already mentioned, you basically to this very day have had the privilege of being freelance. And also, as you mentioned, you also went back to do some freelancing work for VeggieTales. So what were some of that additional freelance?
Phil contacted me, and when I was at VeggieTales, I also do, besides doing 3D stuff, I do a lot of 2D cartoony work. I used to do the illustrations for the annual Big Idea Christmas cards. So Phil knew of my cartoony stuff, and they have, they started with the sock drawer and then some other things where they have the sort of the cutout popsicle stick puppets. And so they asked me to design and do all the artwork for those sequences. So that was a lot of fun. I just got to, draw in my own style. I also ended up working with Phil on his What's in the Bible series, because that had a bunch of those popsicle stick puppet designs in there. And some of the most fun freelance that I've done is doing those, because they're just like, yeah, do it in your own style and have fun with it. And the scripts and everything were really funny and great for those. So super fun to work on those. I loved it.
Now, I think that because of those puppets, I always knew that had to be involved in this. That was before Lesson of the Sock Drawer. It was VeggieTales on TV with Paco, the storytelling mule.
Paco, the storytelling mule. Love that character.
Since there was definitely more than just a handful of Paco segments also for the TV stuff, was you doing your work any more or less different from the stuff that you were doing on Sock Drawer, or was it slightly different, or just the same?
It was very similar. The Paco stuff was just so fun to do. Actually, both of them were. The writing on that is just so funny, and it was, yeah, those were a lot of fun. Same with doing the stuff for the What's in the Bible series. Yeah.
Special thanks for Phil Vischer for remembering that you can do some incredibly bizarre character designs.
Yeah.
Very memorable, though. Very memorable.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so happy that he's like, yeah, just do it in your style. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do it then. I was just gonna say Phil's a great art director. He has a very, very good sense of humor.
I was gonna say it's kind of funny because Phil Vischer, he says himself that he's not a good artist by any stretch of the imagination, but he's still good as an art director. It sounds very contrary, but maybe somebody like Phil can only make something like that have sense. You know what I mean?
Yep.
After VeggieTales, what would you say are some of the more memorable stuff of your freelancing career? Because, I mean, you work for a ton of clients.
I would have to say the children's book publishing stuff is some of the most fun stuff. So my book, Animal Gas, is definitely right up there with some of the most fun stuff and what I'm most proud of. The Animal Gas book, great. I'm kind of blessed because right now I just finished up a new book, and I have two more that I just finished up two new books, and I'm working on a third. They're like right up there with anything else that I've done for how much I'm enjoying it. I'd say the children's book publishing stuff. I have a book, The Big Wig Parade, is coming out in, I think, October. And then I have another one, Counting Cows, coming out in January. And then I think in March, I have Pig Named Joe and His Quest to Be Fancy is coming out. So those are like right up there with anything I've done. That and the murals that I've been doing. I don't know if you've seen any of those, but
that was something else I was going to bring up, because this man, he knows not just paint, but paint small and big murals. That's crazy.
Yeah, I love doing the murals. Murals are a blast. They're so different. The style of them is definitely in my style, but the process for doing them is completely different than anything else I've done. Instead of sitting at a computer drawing or 3D modeling or whatever, you're outside working on something massive, using your whole body, you're using real paint, you're getting it everywhere, people are watching you as you're doing it, and then it's public art, so people are seeing it every day as they're driving by or they're walking through a building. And so I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, my co-host can attest to this, but I said that the way I can describe you is that you are a Swiss Army knife of art. Because you can draw, you can do 3D, you can paint, but also you can sculpt. And what interests me is some of those toy designs that I found on your website. Were they more like custom made? Because they're very much in your style, or have you done like any other commercial work?
Yeah, those would fall under the like the designer or collectible toy category. So I've got my first two. There's a series that I've done called Faulty Dogs, and so the first two of those that are coming out, another month, I think. The first two Faulty Dogs will be out. I'm doing those with a toy company in New York called Tenacious Toys. They're collectible toys, and then hopefully we'll get to do a bunch more. And then I've also been building and doing toy versions of the characters from my books as well. The next thing that I want to kind of do is I want to pair my character design and my sculpting and my toy design with public art. And so I want to start doing really giant sculptures of my characters. So that's my next thing that I'd like to start doing. But yeah, you're right. I'm kind of all over the place with what I work on.
How does somebody come up with such a creative and crazy unique art style?
I don't know. If you look at what I was drawing, like when your earlier questions, when I decided to become an artist, if you look at my art drawings from fourth grade, there you can see a direct line from that to what I'm doing now. I don't know. It's just, doing what you like to do, but also being open to being influenced by other people, but just keep doing it, keep making it. Also playing to your strengths. It's not easy for me to try and draw realistically, and I enjoy doing that some, but yeah, the cartoony, I like to do stuff that makes me smile or makes me laugh or that I like. So just doing it a lot. But part of that is like having a compulsion to do it too, I think. I get antsy and irritated if I'm not making something or drawing something or sculpting or painting or designing or doing something.
What are some of your favorite types of movies or shows and artists you look up to?
Very good question. So my favorite movie of all time is Napoleon Dynamite. I've seen it probably 15 times at least. I can watch that movie over and over and over. So I like kind of funny, strange, quirky characters and movies like that. Another favorite movie of mine is Eagle versus Shark, which is in a similar vein. That's the kind of movie stuff I like. I'm also a big fan of like artists that inspire me are a lot of them are cartoonists and other children's book illustrators, but I like Peanuts and I like the old DC comics, and that kind of stuff has super influenced me. And then there's a lot of animated movies. I like the Studio Ghibli movies and things like that too.
Speaking of artists, how's it like meeting one of your inspirations, Maurice Sendak, while at Microsoft?
Now, how did you know I met Maurice Sendak?
Well, I read it from a source.
I guess he is one of my heroes. His books are amazing. His art is amazing. So that was awesome meeting him. It made it even better is because I was wearing a T-shirt with a character of mine that was on it, and he looked at it and he kept staring at it, and then he said, "Who drew that?" And I said, "I did." And he goes, "That's a very strong drawing." And that's something like I'll never forget that. That was amazing. But yeah, I'm a huge fan, and that was awesome.
Wow, that's truly amazing just to see one of your inspirations. Be like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
Did you participate in any musical activities growing up?
Not really. I played drums in fourth grade, and that was about as far as it went. However, I am a major music fan and have a massive music collection. And I listen to music constantly. Like if I don't have music playing, I get antsy. So whenever I'm working, I have music playing. Whenever I'm driving, I always have to have music playing. So yeah. And I go to a lot of concerts and stuff. So I'm a massive music fan, but not a musician.
I thought you would be the type to be in musical activity because in a couple of photos I've seen, it's at Big Idea. It was of you with a ukulele.
Oh yes, I noodle around on the ukulele a lot. That is true. Yeah, and I was always playing music at Big Idea. Sometimes to listen to, and sometimes to just see what happened as a sort of a social experiment to see what would happen. And Soothing Sounds for Baby and Music Played by Elephants. You should look those up.
I should listen to those albums someday. They sound pretty good.
Oh yeah.
I noticed that both in your childhood and now, you reside in the state of Indiana. What are some of your favorite places to go while in Indiana?
Whew. Favorite places in Indiana. I like Fort Wayne a lot. That's a city that's just north of us, and it's got a really good art scene going on there. That's where a lot of my murals are. That's a real nice city to go to. I also really like the Indianapolis Children's Museum. I'm actually going to be one of the resident artists there for the next year, and that's a fantastic museum. We have a dog park here where we take the dogs to run around, and that's another favorite place of mine.
Congrats on being a like the reciting artist on that museum. Congrats.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm super jazzed about it. I didn't even realize it at first, but it's the biggest children's museum in the world right now, right there in Indianapolis. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
The newsletters, What's the Big Idea, and the Super Fantastic Veggie Fan Club. What can you tell us about that?
Whew, let's see. I remember doing artwork for the newsletters, and that was a lot of fun. I remember it getting some more creative freedom for the newsletter stuff. So I mentioned before about one of the artists that I worked with, Jody Nilsson. One of my favorite things to ever come out of Big Idea was she did a portrait of me for the newsletter that I actually ended up buying from her, and I'm hanging on my wall. And it's of me playing the ukulele, and she did such an incredible job. I was like, that is one of my favorite things ever, and that was when I was featured in the newsletter.
You mentioned your wife, and I always love hearing stories about, these people and how they eventually get married and stuff like that. What was your love life like with your wife?
So we met in Seattle. We met at the church that we were going to. She is actually a musician, plays the violin. We met out in Seattle, and let's see, we've been married since 1994. And she's awesome. We have one child who's a college student out in Portland. It's funny because we met in Seattle, but she went to college in Vermont, which is where I grew up. So we immediately started talking about that when we met. She's also super into music. And actually, our first date was we went to go see a Beatrix Potter illustration exhibit out in Seattle. So we went to see a children's book illustration exhibit. So yeah.
I have to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be talking with me and my co-host. I always love hearing, even if I'm hearing something that I've already heard before, I always love hearing a new perspective on it. And with this episode, I felt like we were able to get a little bit more technical, a little bit more in the weed of things, just people just kind of like brushing it over, but it's also just remembering all of the really fun little tidbits and details and that sort of thing. So I'm super glad that I had that amazing opportunity with you. That's everything. Again, thank you so much for the conversation, and have a good rest of your evening, and take care.
Sounds good. See ya. Bye.
I'd like to thank Bryan for his time and for sharing all of the amazing secrets as well. You can find Bryan on Facebook, X, and his website. Links all in the description. I'd also like to thank MrLunch for all of the additional research as well. And until next time, we'll see you guys on the next What's the Big Idea podcast.
My name is Bryan Ballinger, and you're listening to What's the Big Idea podcast.